Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate that you guys have waited all day for us, I'm sure. So, yeah, why don't you guys introduce yourselves and what you do?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here. My name is Eva. I have a background in sponsorship effectiveness research, currently head of Blauw Sponsorship Impact. I mainly work with global brands and rights holders on helping them understand how sponsorship actually works for them. So we move away from just media values or logo visibility and focus on understanding the way sponsorship works in terms of moving perceptions or driving behavior.
And I'm Toan Ravenscroft. I'm the managing partner of MSQ, Sport and Entertainment. I guess we work on the slight complementary side of that. We're working at the intersection of fan culture, sport properties and brands to really bring sponsorships to life. And I think hopefully the name of the session, from sort of sponsorships to partnerships, is really where we try and activate. So that's working across the board in that space creatively for the last 20 years, even though I look like a boy.
So just to kick us off, why is sponsorship having such a movement now?
Yeah, thanks. I think sponsorship, as we're seeing at the moment, is around 6 to 8% compound annual growth per year. And I think the reason for that is numerous. Media-led, it's really hard to connect with an audience directly. I think from a culture side, brands are looking to show up with consumers around things that they love. And when you do so, we know that it's far more powerful. So that's two things that are really playing into the sponsorship space at the moment. I think a lot of big brands are putting their efforts in that space, and we've seen that primarily in football and Formula One in the current market, where there's a lot more activity taking place, which is fantastic that's happening. But it also has a creative imperative that comes out the back of it, which is it's more competitive. So I think what we're seeing a lot is, whereas before, and you touched on it, it was a more media-led sponsorship, which would get you in a great place. It's now that is really table stakes. That's, you know, getting that right, getting your audience right, being with the right partner, the right asset is really just the start of the story. It's from there, how do you build something that really connects, that really drives through fan culture? Because, you know, this is what fans love. This is their escapism after their boring days listening to us talk or doing something else even more boring. They want to escape. They want to see their favorite football game. They want to enjoy it. So to do so, we've really got to take care and show up in that space.
Yeah, maybe I fully agree. And maybe to add to that, what we also see in research is that fans are becoming increasingly critical about how brands behave. So they're not just looking for, you know, messaging or communication, but they're actually looking for actions. And sponsorship and sports in particular has the unique ability to allow brands to be societally relevant, to show their societal relevance also in activating a sponsorship in an authentic, relevant way to fans. So that also makes sponsorships, I think, an increasingly popular marketing instrument.
Yeah, just to build on that, if I can. Sort of live example, if you like, which I wanted to drop in, not just to plug our work, but I think it's a really good example of this. Is we just launched over the weekend. I was at a PepsiCo in Barcelona launching Duracell, their partnership with La Liga. And when you think about a traditional partner, you know, you could just be a tier partner, you could be a top tier, you could be wherever in that. But what Duracell did, and I think why the asset is really smart, is to own a specific moment. And I think when you start doing that, and it's going to launch properly in August, so we'll see what fans think there. But I think they've taken the added time board. And I think that's just a really nice, creative example, you know, of how you can do something that really works for the brand. I think every single person in this room will understand what Duracell stands for. It's about unstoppable power, energy. It's about lasting longer. When that board comes up, it is a moment in a stadium when fans genuinely zoom in and go, have I got 5 minutes to save this game, or have we got 10 minutes to win it? What happens? And I think that's something we're really excited to see. And then that's just, again, the start to build on how do you creatively activate that, which is where we're going to come into play.
So backtracking a little bit, let's talk about what a successful sponsorship partnership looks like beyond logos, beyond visibility. Well, what do you think makes a successful partnership?
Well, talking about successful partnerships, I think what's really important is that the contract, the deal that's closed, that's just a starting point, and the partnership is created after that. So, and maybe even in years and years after, signing that contract, the way rights holder and brand behave after that, after signing that contract, that is what defines a partnership. And that is also when real value is created or maybe destroyed, in the way they collaborate together. And building a partnership is, of course, about having shared objectives, because shared objectives can lead to shared success. And I think the most important thing in creating a successful partnership lies in having the same commitment to optimizing a sponsorship along the way. So not just in having a successful deal or buying those rights, but having having the commitment together, both the rights holder and the brand, in keep learning, keep optimizing, keep understanding what works and what doesn't, and optimizing the success of the sponsorship while it's continuing maybe for decades and decades.
Yeah, I think you've touched upon so many foundational elements. I think being in it for the long haul, we will all know immediately partners of our clubs, national federations that have been in it for the long haul. One of our clients in the UK is Barclays. Barclays were obviously the lead partner of the Premier League, but they've been in the game for 25 years with that partnership. And when you've been in the game for that long, and we spoke about it earlier, you do get the Barclaysman. You do get, that's pure Barclays. And you get these phrases kind of coming out of it just through that pure longevity, which I think is super important. I think on the other side of things, from a more, say, creative, how do you activate point of view, which really helps to deliver that. You spoke about aligning with the rights holder brands. I think that that's critical. And I think brands, often we see brands when they're entering sponsorships for the first time, they're used to going, this is the brand story we want to tell. It's super important. That's what we do. Everything's got to ladder to that. And I think when you're in sponsorships and you want to move it into partnerships, you've got to understand that there's another player at the table. And when you do that, that's when the magic starts to happen. Because when you're starting to align with their values, their brand ideas, their objectives, their projects, whatever it might be, that's when the tap gets turned on a little bit too. There might be some commercial people in the room, I'm not sure, so I might be going, this. But that is when we move beyond the right still. That's when we move beyond the clipboard commercial managers going, no, you've only got 3 posts, to this works for us too, what can we do together? And that is when we start to get to the magic and when things start to really land and we're all pushing in the same direction and it's 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah. I fully agree, and to add to that, from our measurement and research experience, we never see impact coming from just exposure or just rights. It's the activation, the actual connection, the emotional relationship that's built through sponsorships between brand and fans. That is where, as you say, the magic happens. Yeah.
So going back to a point you made, Eva, about the contract being the start, what I kind of found interesting is that bridge between the contract and the long-term partnership and what it takes to build something sustainable and something with longevity for the brands to see value in, but also for the consumers to be able to relate to.
I can chip in there because I think I'm actually incidentally teeing you up here, because it can be lovely and it can be really exciting when a brand comes into a partnership, right? Whether you go to a football match for the first time, you're like, hey, this is cool, this is different to the brand normal, and you start to see people from the brand really come into it. But it is nothing without measurement, and we are always super tight on this from our side. We're saying, hey, what are we actually wanting to deliver and achieve, and let's set out that measurably at the top. Because if we're not doing that, what starts to happen in year 2 is someone goes, why are we doing this? Why are we spending X million on a partnership? And especially if it's not a marketeer that's in charge of those discussions, or not a strong marketeer in charge of those discussions, it starts to become a cost rather than a benefit to a brand. And I think you have to get the measurements set, because it should be that this is really driving incredible value, and it's a key part of the chain, and whatever that might be. And by the way, this isn't just consumer facing, and I think we see this a lot now in terms of how the market's evolved. It's always been a big part of it, but B2B partnerships have, gone really accelerated in the last couple of years. And you only have to look at some of the shirts in the Premier League, for example, and you'll see the brands that are there are not brands you walk into the supermarket and buy or go down your high street and see. They are brands that are doing it for B2B reasons. And I think that they have really clear, often super commercial objectives. And I think that's when, again, you start to get to the magic, is when you can link it directly to commercial outcome as well as brand, marketing, communication outcome.
Yeah, oh, well, thanks for that. Yeah, and doing measurement right, at least it's always connecting sponsorship to those business outcomes. So, a common mistake, of course, is only looking at impressions or visibility metrics, whereas I think we both agree that those metrics are not, they're not a success factor. They're not a success metric. They're merely telling you something about your activity, but not helping you understand if you're actually reaching your brand objectives through the sponsorship. So the right way of measuring is always connecting sponsorship to business outcomes. And what I come across quite often is, talking about measurement is people looking for a single number or a single metric, proving sponsorship success. And of course I understand, because, a single number is really easy to communicate to boardroom level, and it's often also reassuring, that single number, but it's also often wrong. You should really look at a broad set of metrics to fully understand the actual impact of sponsorships. And those metrics should be focused on understanding questions like, are we reaching the right people? Are we actually moving perceptions in the right way? Are we driving behavior towards our brand? And the long-term nature of sponsorships, as you just touched, is also really important in the way you set up a measurement, because sponsorship works gradually. It doesn't work overnight. It doesn't work over 1 month or 1 quarter. It is something you plan for decades ahead. So you also want to plan measurement for years and years and years, and keep tracking consistently what works and what doesn't work, to understand how you move forward and how you optimize the impact of your partnerships. And a common mistake is also that people do understand that sponsorship is something for the long term, because we usually sign 3-year or 5-year contracts, but then after the contract is signed, they want to see the results after a month or after 1 season, and that's just not how it works. It only leads to premature decisions and inconsistent strategies. So also in measurement, that longevity, the long term, is really, really important.
So I wanted to talk about emotional relevance in terms of sponsorship and partnership, and if it is becoming just as important as commercial value.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. Thinking about a good example, which I think can always paint this picture better. If you look at what Spotify have done with Barcelona, and they did it again at the weekend, that's about emotional connection, right? Yeah, they've got the naming rights to an incredible new stadium that's going to look fantastic when it's finished. But what they did with that, and what they've done with the shirt partnership, which I'm sure many people in this room will know, is they flip that regularly. And the Olivia Rodrigo kind of logo on the front of the shirt for our Classico, that's massive. And they did it previously with Travis Scott. That's about emotional connection. That's about engaging with a different audience that's outside, rather than just saying, hey, we're Spotify, please subscribe. It's saying, hey, we understand culture, we understand those lines blur, we understand that actually Olivia Rodrigo's audience might be super interesting for Barcelona and vice versa, and how can we play emotionally in that space? You know, she did a fantastic performance, I think, on the eve of the match. She was at the game, and I'm sure there's been lots, and I haven't seen it all land yet, but I'm sure there'll be lots around there. That will be built with emotional first thinking. They may well be laddering that through a fully integrated piece where they're talking from a B2B perspective, and not forgetting internal audiences as well, because I think that sometimes they do get looked upon differently, because it is emotionally exciting when you walk into a room and go, hey, we've done a deal with a football club, or we've done a partnership. It does get people going, because it is, let's face it, it's the biggest sport in the world. It's the most exciting, engaging one. But you've really got to harness that emotion in the right way. That always starts with a deep, deep understanding of the fan, a deep understanding of the sports property, and then a deep understanding of the sector and how you can play slightly differently.
Yeah, fans really don't care, you know, if you've showed up. They don't care if you've turned up to the game, but they do care about how you behave after you've showed up. And I think that's what you're showing through activations like this one.
Yeah, just build on that. I think that's something that we always start with as a business, is like, okay, great, everyone's pumped, we're pumped too, but how do we make people care? Because, you know, even if you put an earned, you know, a PR angle on it, it's like, what's the story? Why do people come into this? Why are they interested? And I think, you know, we touched on it earlier. We were talking about Formula One earlier, and to sort of bring in an adjacent, there's over 350 partners of Formula One teams, just the teams. So if you are just another brand in that space, I've got no reason to care about you. Like, well done for showing up and getting some media value. Cool, but we've got to push on and find that emotional place where we can play and find our space to play. And then on the other side of that, once you've found that platform which works for everyone, how do you activate it? How do you comms plan it? How do you be really smart on the other side? And that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. You know, people will say, how do we make this the talk? How do we make this viral? Those words get said. There's a lot of thinking that goes into actually how you build that gradually, and how you do that, and how you really anticipate where fans want to see that type of content.
I mean, something that stands out is, I mean, Spotify is in like the unique position where it is a music streaming platform. Like, how important and how impactful is like the kind of crossover between cultures in a kind of sponsorship partnership? Because it's quite unique to see like an album cover on a massive football team, or even like years and years ago when Atletico used to have like Spider-Man 2 on their shirt, and different movies going on. So how important is that crossover of cultures in terms of impacting the consumer, the audience,
Well, what we see in research is that it can be really impactful, especially on helping brands to stand out. So a specific example is PepsiCo. We've been measuring the impact of their UEFA Champions League sponsorship for, I don't know, more than 10 years already. And for them, as you know, the category they're in is obviously very difficult to stand out, with Coca-Cola also being very present in sports. To give you an idea, we always ask, of course, for people to tell us how strong the association is between a brand and a sponsorship. And very consistently, globally, over time, 1 in 3 people thinks that Coca-Cola is a sponsor of the Champions League, whereas they've never spent €1 or dollar or whatever on Champions League sponsorship. That is just because their heritage in sport is so strong. People automatically associate Coca-Cola with Champions League. So for Pepsi, it's really important to make sure they prove their distinctiveness as a brand through the Champions League sponsorship. So in addition to the rights they had, you know, around the pitch, etc., they decided to become the main sponsor of the Champions League kickoff show, which is like, you know, the Super Bowl halftime show, but then for Champions League. And that allowed them to connect their sports sponsorship to music and to entertainment, and to, you know, make their involvement in Champions League broader than just the football. And from that moment, we really saw their results elevated, just because, you know, they made that connection with music and sport.
And I think just to put that in sort of human context, if you like, you know, I like music. and I like football. You know, we're not one-dimensional. And I think that's really important to remember. You know, our agency is called MSQ Sport and Entertainment. The entertainment side of the business is vastly music, and bringing those partnerships to life. From a Coca-Cola perspective, we worked on the other side of that for many years. Previous agency and moving through now, whether that be FIFA or IOC, and I agree, talked about long-term earlier. Yes, Coca-Cola is huge, but they've stayed. And they've stayed, and they've stayed, and they've activated around that. And just one final past experience one in talking about the blend of sport and entertainment together. You know, we did a lot with Heineken when I worked on that at my previous agency. You know, we wouldn't just be showing up at Zandvoort down the road here with just the banners around the Formula One. There would also be performances that would be tapped into local culture, and we did the same in Mexico, in Shanghai, around the world, to really bring that to life. And I think it's just really important, and it's important for rights holders and brands to remember this, like, get into the fans' heads. Get into the feel of the audience that you're actually trying to reach. And we speak this a lot when people take new partnerships. Have you been to a game? Have you gone to a concert? Have you been to see it? Because it's really, really important to do that and to feel and get that first-hand feeling for what's going on, as well as the important data and statistics that back that up. Because otherwise you're living in PowerPoint presentations, where sometimes when you go there, you see, hey, this is a real connection. And you know, I'm sure everybody appreciates music and football have gone together forever. So it's always really, really rich, and there's always new ways that we can bring that to life.
So going back to that emotional impact, how do you think brands are actually measuring that impact?
Well, yeah, I think as I said a little bit earlier, unfortunately, you know, measurement is a big topic. We all talk about measurement in the industry, but still, I think a majority, unfortunately, often still gets it wrong, especially by relying too heavily on just the exposure metrics, the impressions, the visibility, whereas that's not the real value, as we discussed, that's not the real value of what we're talking about. So, yeah, we're really trying to move organizations away from just looking at that exposure and understanding more of what that actually does to people. And I often use the comparison with a car. You know, the exposure is the fuel of your car, but the impact is the engine. So, you know, by just looking at your fuel level, you have no idea if the car is actually moving, let alone if it's moving in the right direction. And you really want to understand if you're moving people in the right direction, to understand if your sponsorship is actually being a success, if it's contributing to your brand objectives.
I build on that. I think from our side, you know, what we're able to get now that's magic is real-time data, and it has been like that for a while, where we do need to be there for the long haul, but we can optimize, adjust, play slightly differently, tweak things, and we can see that, especially with a lot of the outputs, obviously, that we're delivering at the end of all this, will be social content, creator content, whatever it might be. We can use the data and analytics to do that. But we still need to apply that creative edge to go, okay, cool, this is the leap, this is the cut through. And I think absolutely fundamental to have those measures set in place at the top. What we always like to do is go, you know, this is it, this is the benchmark, this is where we have to hit, and then this is the stretch, and this is where we want to take it, or where we think we can take it, and then try and bring people on that journey with us.
So going back a little bit to long-term partnerships and the importance of longevity, how does storytelling and emotional connection create long-term value?
I think what's really important is consistency around that. I think brands that flip and flop with their sponsorship platforms, and hopefully this will back you up, it compounds when you do it year after year and you show up and everyone knows what you're saying and doing. I think what we often see is the brand will come with a brand idea, whatever that might be, their brand communication line, their platform. We then want to adapt that into a sponsorship take on that, and that's where we spend a lot of our strategic time. So we really want to, again, understand that audience, understand the rights holder, and understand what's going on in the sector and the space around it, and bring that together into something really powerful. And I think when you get to something consistent in that space, And it's the age-old kind of marketing and communications piece, which is you refresh the ideas, you refresh the tactics, but we're saying the same story. We evolve that story, we flex that story, we tell it in different channels, we're telling it integrated, but it has to be consolidated from the same thought. And there's plenty of great evidence with this. I don't know if I'm doing a bad thing by mentioning System 1 on this stage, but System 1 have done some great pieces of work around that, about how consistency pays off. And the brands that flip and flop, 1 week with this, next week with that, consumers, people in the real world don't know where they stand. So I think consistency is a great multiplier for that. And that's something that we were always looking to develop as an agency with our guys. To go, hey, this is an idea that we think can build for 3 to 5 years beyond. Who knows what happens in the future, but at least through that. And we've got to commit to it. And if we commit to it, and we start building, you start to see it grow and grow and grow. You know, I'm working on a project at the moment that isn't actually a sponsorship. It's with Under Armour Next, and it's a fantastic thing. Check it out if you haven't seen it. But Under Armour give 4 athletes every 3 months a professional contract. They give them all the advice, all the support, everything that you want. And they're being really, really consistent about that. And I think that's when you have a real role in culture.
Yeah, absolutely agree on the consistency and you know, talking about System 1 consistency, you just mentioned Duracell. You know, what animal do we all think of when he mentions Duracell? The rabbit, of course. And that is, you know, that's also what you're doing through sponsorship. You're building associations, building memory structures in the brain, helping people that if they are, you know, in front of that shelf in the supermarket, deciding which bag of crisps to take, there will be something in their brain remembering of Lay's being a sponsor of the Champions League, for example, because that's how our brain works. We're lazy. We just want an easy association at that moment when we're taking that purchase decision. Mm-hmm. And consistency in communication around the brand really helps driving brand behavior in that way. So that's super important.
I think you touched upon something really important there. Is around how emotional we are as human beings, right? And I think our decision-making process, we might like to rationalize them, but they're really often emotional choices. That's where sponsorship partnership plays such a strong role, because it's able to build those emotional connections. But what I would say is also, in my biased view, pretty powerful about sponsorship is that it's able to flex to the other side of the game and play performance. So you can use it to impact performance metrics. You often hear brand marketers at the moment talking about, I've got my performance side over here, and I've got my brand building side over here. Sponsorship shouldn't be thought of as just a media platform over there. It should be thought across the board, able to work both sides, and then you're getting more value out of what seems like often a very big rights deal. But hopefully you can bring it across everything.
Yeah, the consistency is really in integrating sponsorship into the brand narrative. And that can even be, you know, different sponsorships. You're a very diverse sponsorship portfolio with rights in entertainment, culture and sports. But as long as they're all consistently integrated into the same brand narrative, you will start seeing results on actual brand impact. And that's, I think, the real value of sponsorship.
So, obviously, you spoke about your lovely car analogy with the... Because I'm looking right now at this picture of Ajax lifting the Champions League.
Kluivert,
yeah. I wasn't sure. I can't see from it. Because obviously we talked about associating certain sponsors with certain time periods in football. Well, I'm using football as an example now. So, for example, Kluivert's lifting that trophy at that, I think it was 95. Does that mean, is that like a good partnership, or is that a good timing kind of thing?
Well, it was definitely a good time, of course, for them. But I think the reason so what we're seeing, because maybe not everyone is seeing it, we're seeing Kluivert lifting the Champions League Cup in '95, and there's ABN AMRO on his shirt, which is a Dutch bank who've obviously been the main sponsor of Ajax for a very, very long time, and currently they still sponsor the women's team and also the youth teams. I think the reason for this being a good sponsorship is not necessarily the fact that they were luckily, on the shirt at the time of a very successful moment. The reason this is a strong partnership is because they've worked with Ajax for a very, very long time on genuinely being a very relevant sponsor for fans, creating great activations, and still being super relevant as a sponsor of the women's team and the youth team. And what they're doing really, really good, ABN AMRO, is that they have a very strong brand narrative around equal chances in terms of gender, in terms of everything, and everything they do here, but also in all the other sponsorships they have, contributes to that brand narrative about equal chances. So that, I think, makes this sponsorship really, really strong.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think that's a cherry on the top of a cake, It's a moment that you go, boom. And I think what if we were doing that today, what we would be thinking is, okay, they're going into the Champions League final. What's our reactive plan for if that were to happen? I mentioned, a bit of a clang, that I was at El Clasico at the weekend in Barcelona, and then the day after, everything started to happen. You may have seen the players riding around, players going to Plaza de Catalunya on bikes, but then the brands started to step in. I walked past the Nike store in the center of Barcelona. It was being completely refitted, ready for the players. They had the parade coming with the bus. And those are moments that, as a brand, you should plan for and you should show up at, because these are those emotional pictures that last a lifetime, and those memories, and that's what we're trying to build here, and emotionally from a brand marketing and communications perspective. You can't necessarily make it happen on the pitch, but if it does, grab it. And play a role that's additive, because the fans, will value it. There's always a role that you can play that adds something to a fan, and they can sometimes be super simple and really just easy and obvious to activate. So they don't have to be always grand.
No, agree. And you can only show up in the right way if you really understand what's driving those fans, if you have respect for, the culture of the club, of the heritage of the sport, and the fan culture. So it's really important to understand those fans, to be part of the fans as a brand, to do the right thing in the right moments.
Yeah, just to build on that, sorry, I'm going to keep building. Fans, and especially now, will find you out like that. If you are inauthentic and you don't belong there, they will not care. And worse still, what could be sort of dynamite for you as a brand could end up, blowing up your house, because if you get it wrong and you show up wrong, it can have a really detrimental effect. And that's why it's really important to get everything that you just said in place, set, consistent, clear, and then you start to build and build and build, and fans will come along with you. I think fans are open-minded to understanding commercial partners, so long as they do it in the right way.
Okay, so just to wrap things up, so it's one thing to remember when trying to build partnerships. What would you advise to people in terms of that?
We've spoken about it a bit already, which is if you build together with those insights at the start, so really true fan insight, really true brand insight, and a really true rights holder insight. And sometimes that one gets forgotten. If you build that into your sponsorship platform, you've got potential magic. Do not think about your sponsorship as a media platform. Think about it as a creative platform. If you start thinking about it as a creative platform, and you get the internal team, the brand team, the advertising team, the social team, whoever, employee engagement, all coming around that, you're going to get to something that 9 times out of 10 is going to be really, really powerful. So that would be my advice.
We've said a lot already, of course, but for rights holders, I think my advice would be to stop selling rights as bundles of exposure, but start selling rights as a strategic brief. And then for brands, probably to, as we just discussed, to make sure that sponsorship is always integrated into brand objectives, integrated into a brand narrative, because a sponsorship without strategic brand objectives is like it's just an event with a logo on it.
Well, thank you very much. You've definitely opened my eyes into sponsorship and how much it is in our subconscious, especially when we think back at those moments and those memories growing up. So it's been a pleasure sharing the stage with you. And yeah, I really enjoyed it and hearing what you guys had to say.